Electricast. Hey, it's Paris. You know I love sparkly things, right? Like stars. Duh. And thanks to Hilton and AutoCamp, I just slept under them. Picture me, serving looks by the fire outside my luxurious Airstream, making s'mores with the kids, while a national park is our backdrop. The great outdoors meets Hilton hospitality. That's hot. Explore all the new ways to stay at Hilton.com. Hilton for the stay.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
If you want to make a story moment, sometimes it's better just to take the reins away from them and make your player sit through that moment and hopefully enjoy it, right? So ludonarrative dissonance, right, is sort of almost like a meta term where there's a dissonance or a conflict between the broader goals that you have kind of for yourself versus the explicit goals that you have in the game.
Hey, Martin, welcome back to Brain Arcade. Last time you were on, we talked a lot about narrative, and we got a question. But before we get to that, how are you doing, man? What's going on? What's happening? Give us a little bit about what you got going on.
In my world, my world is quite busy. I mean, apart from having a 16-month-old, which keeps me on my toes.
Right. Oh my God, 16 months already?
16 months already, I know. It's crazy. Yeah.
Time is flying.
Time is flying. The days are long, but the years are short, as they say. So it's great. I am working on a little prototype, which is really fun. And then I'm working on a graphic novel that I'm hoping to launch a Kickstarter for, which is very exciting.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah.
That's fun. Oh, and also when you get working on Kickstarter, I'd love to ask you some questions about that.
Let's do it.
So lots of great responses to our last episode. And in fact, somebody left us a really fun question. So I figured we'd have you back today. I'll read the question here in a second, and let's just discuss it and talk about it and see where we end up.
Yeah, sounds good.
All right. I know you touched upon this briefly, but personally, I'd love for you to dig deeper into the pros and cons of immediate feedback to explicit choices a player makes that impact the narrative. Example, everybody liked that, a la BioWare, Telltale games, versus the hidden consequences of choices the player may not even know were choices, wait, the game was tracking that, a la Chrono Trigger or Dark Souls. So what, just general response, initial response to that? Because I have some structural things to sort of talk about, but.
Yeah, I mean, anytime someone mentions Chrono Trigger, I could talk my ear off. Chrono Trigger is my favorite game. In a lot of ways, it sort of had a pretty formative effect on me in terms of the way that I think about, wow, we could actually create interactive game experiences that remember what I do and change things in interesting ways. So for those that haven't played Chrono Trigger, I think Plexicraft was the commenter on YouTube. There's a really famous in game circle scenes in Chrono Trigger where you are put on trial and things that you've done in basically the first hour and a half of the game are put on trial. And what was so cool about it was very subversive because you're put on trial for things that I guess would be considered tropes or just common things you do in RPGs. So, for example, there's a character, a robot that you can battle again and again and again. And right outside the battle is this guy's lunch that if you drink it, it restores all your HP and MP. And so what the game was telling you to do is, just fight this, go eat this dude's lunch, go fight this thing and you come back, and that you could just do that ad nauseum as many times as you want. Well, in the trial, this guy comes and says, Chrono is not a good guy because he ate my lunch, right? And you're thinking, oh my gosh, this was paying attention to this thing that I did. So, I mean, they were way ahead of their time in terms of thinking about playing and subverting different things that you do structurally in RPGs, which was really cool.
What's interesting about that time, let's see, Chrono Trigger was PlayStation 1, right?
Super Nintendo. It was 1995.
Oh, SNES, that's right.
Yeah, it was 95.
That's right. Which has even so like here. I'll just start with offhand. I know PlayStation 1, and by the way, this was gigantic at the time, had 2 megs of RAM. So the amount of power output or things that you could store in memory were pretty small. And also remember, this is a SNES game. Not a whole lot of games had a save capacity.
Yeah.
Like, people had to put in little watch batteries, or manufacturers had to put in little watch batteries to, create like a persistent save system. Or actually another way they did it was like, there were only so many variations on your progress that you would have, and they would give you like a continue code, right?
Yeah.
And so, they were like, they would map all the branches where all the stopping points were and give you the permutations as a code. And then you would get that. And then the game would just pick up on that branch. Right. But even at that time, the reason I bring this up is because, games previous to this, even if they wanted to do it, it was very difficult to do. Right.
Yeah.
But the SNES is the first time we start to see that. Remember the Zelda Gold cartridge that had had a battery and you could save your game and all kinds of stuff? Like that was pivotal in games, right?
Yeah.
And so I think lots of game designers thought it would have been cool to introduce, but the mechanism to do it really only existed on like PC or computer games.
Yeah. So that's what I believe Plexicraft is talking about. Basically, there's no hinting at all that this is going to be brought back up. And then suddenly the game presents, oh, remember that thing that you did? Well, it had a consequence down the line. Now, what they're talking about with the first example, if you're not familiar with, the Bioware and Telltale games, and by the way, I joined Telltale sort of towards the end of when they were wrapping up the first season of Walking Dead. So someone had pioneered this, everybody liked that, or so-and-so will remember that. That was a pretty novel thing at the time for the Telltale games, right? And so basically how that would work is you'd be presented with a dialogue choice or some kind of interaction choice, and you would make that decision with that character, and then there'd be a little bit of UI that would show up at the top of the screen that would say, Clementine will remember that, or something like that. And so it was trying to tell you that the game was paying attention to the ways that you were making choices, and this character was going to change and respond to the way that you were role playing in that moment, right? And so it was trying to be very explicit about that. And so you got that immediate feedback with that. So those are, I think, the two kind of scenarios that this commenter is talking about.
Yeah, and I would say, so I like both. And my only, from a clean capital GD game design POV is I like to always evaluate on what I call like the informed shopper, right? In that like the players should know that they are having some consequence even before they make the choice, just so that they know what's going on. Sometimes it's nice for a surprise, but really, like, we're talking about, that's a structural thing, right? Kind of like when you play like the old Fables or almost anything by Peter Molyneux, you know that at the end of the game, it's really just, are you a good or bad character? Right? But before that, it was very interesting. You play like Populous, or you play like, was it literally good or evil? What was the one with all the giant avatars?
I think it is Black and White.
Oh, Black and White. That's right.
Yeah, Black and White. Yeah.
Which is just somebody hit the thesaurus for good and evil and look for like, like a different way to communicate it. So I love that game, but I have problems with it. So, but like that's inherent to the system. So I don't think you need to like, it's sort of given to you as part of the premise of the world. Whereas like, I think you're making a character choice here. Right. And so the other characters are going to respond to you, makes the world feel very alive, right? As like a real place. And so I think there are different reasons to use both of these systems. Like I've got another example that I'll throw in later that's from an older game as well. Like when I think about these systems, it calls up lots of PC games for me, right? Or like, 90s or 2000s era PC games. So
well, I played a lot of JRPGs and growing up, and JRPGs would play with tropes a lot, right? So a good example would be in like Final Fantasy IV, they would introduce unwinnable fights for the service of the story, right? You're facing a boss and a villain that is so strong that it is inevitable that your party is going to die, right? And so it's interesting because, you know, I've seen people, if you look at something like Dark Souls, it's a skill test for that. But in this case, it's just there to serve the narrative. I mean, it's straight from the anime playbook of like, you know, Vegeta has come back so strong that, you know, there's no way that Goku can take him on, right? But what's interesting is I don't think it's a feels bad in that moment, because your expectation as a player, it's almost like, you know what, let me turn off my like systems RPG power progression for a minute and just like, you know, you're on like a Disney ride. You know what I mean? Like you're being on rails through a story moment that the creators want everybody equally to kind of experience in the same way, you know?
Yep. And I would say I disagree slightly that there's no gameplay value to it, because I think in making you fight a battle that you can't win, you feel it more strongly when you do have a power fantasy upgrade, right? Like it's basically part of that system. My only problem though is like how you handle that can feel very, very good or very, very bad. Yeah. And so, you know, it's like, and I've played both, and I've thrown the controller sometimes, or sometimes I've been like, oh, that's a very elegant way that they did that. Or like, wow, you know what? I didn't even realize I was never supposed to win that. I just lost it and it progressed. And like,
well, I think some of it comes down to player expectations of what you're trying to accomplish. So in the example of Chrono Trigger, the story progresses forward no matter whether you get the guilty or not guilty verdict, right? Mm-hmm. I think you're given like a very immaterial reward for getting a not guilty. Like you get a bunch of health pots or something like that, right? So what's nice about that is you don't get locked out of content in the game that you might have wanted to experience in that. And you're also not locked out of like unique items and things like that. So, you know, one of the problems in some of the Dark Souls, like Elden Ring and things like that, is on your like first playthrough, it's very easy to like make a mistake in the progression and lock yourself out of content that you might have wanted to experience, right? And I guess some people like that, you know what I mean? But I remember the first time I played Dark Souls, like I accidentally like punched a character and I didn't realize that you could like make it so they don't aggro you anymore. And so I killed him and I locked myself out of my class progression, right? And I started the game over again because of that, right?
Right.
So
dead ends need to be advertised as well.
They do, right? And you know, I think it's actually become it used to be a trope where like you would go into a room or down a path and then realize it was like a one way and you couldn't go back anymore. And I think smart designers would start adding a message like, this is going to be like the final gauntlet. Like, do you want to continue or not? Right.
Right. And it's not so much smart. I think it's like evolved over time, because early on as game designers, we were so much more diegetic in the way we've approached things. And we didn't like, a lot of times it was don't break the world and also get good. Right. Like it was basically like, it was a harsh reality. Like a great example of this is like, I went back and played Space Channel 5 recently because they did an HD remake or something like that.
Yeah.
And I forgot there's really not a whole lot of on-screen prompting for what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
You have to just figure it out. But it feels more organic when you get it right. It's like perfectly playing a music video. Yes. But at the same time, I was like, dude, I'm old. I'm not figuring this out again. You know, like especially after games like Guitar Hero and, you know, Parappa the Rappa 2. And like, you know, it's like it evolved. And so when you go back and you're like, oh my God, this is so much harsher than I remember. Right. But it's the same thing here with some of these dead ends. Like I could tell you some of the design meetings back at that time would have been like, oh, this is going to dead end. And you're like, it sure does. Like,
too bad.
You know, you have to figure it out. And you go back to the beginning and it was a lot less like hand-holdy. And so like at the same, like I do like the new edition of like a UI element that says like, warning, this is a one-way decision.
Right.
Like handle all your side quests before you come back to this because it's about to complete. Now in open world games, it's a little less, they still do it, but it's a little less like important because you're like, all the side missions are usually still there. Like you just go back into the world and, it's not so linear, right? Whereas like when you're playing something like an RPG or JRPG, you're like, oh, this is quote unquote the end.
Right.
I am not ready for it. Right. So
yeah, and I think that usually as opposed to like the big open world games, there's more discrete, like I guess more fleshed out side quests typically in like a JRPG. Like you get to the final, the point at which if you walk into the room, you're going to fight the final boss. And there's like maybe 5 to 10 in-game like quest lines that the designers want you to go at like your high level and get the best equipment before you, if you want to do that, right?
Yeah.
Versus open world, like I don't need to do the 50th fetch quest in that village over there necessarily, right? Unless I'm, really going for a completion run, right?
Right. And so I've got a couple of different examples of like more subtle, like the second system here, which is like a hidden consequence of your choices kind of a thing. And like a forced death. So did you ever play Planescape Torment, the first one?
Long time ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
For the longest time, I was scum saving and loading at a fight that I was supposed to lose because I was trying to win it. And I did it a lot until one time I was like, oh, you know what? I'm immortal. What happens if I just die? Right. Yeah. And then that was the progression. You had to wake up in the morgue in like the next part of town. And I was like, oh, I mean, I get it as a puzzle, but it wasn't until I had to go back to the basic premise of the game, which is like, oh, I'm this immortal dude. And there's no clue or hint that that's the right path, is that you actually have to like wake up in the morgue somewhere. I think Mort, the Flaming Skull, I think he has a line that is supposed to hint at it, but they don't hit you over the head with it. And so like, I have mixed feelings about that because I might have just bounced. Right. But I stuck with it because it was so different as an RPG at that time.
Yeah.
Again, and I had just come off of like, one of the Baldur's Gates or something like Baldur's Gate 2 or something. And I was like, oh, this is more of this. And I was like, what is this Planescape world or this, like this, like TSR always had like all these weird sort of D&D like knockoffs, or not knockoffs, but break-offs, right? Like Gamma World and West World and and Planescape was one of those. And I wasn't into it from a paper and pencil standpoint. So I was really into playing this as a computer game and like, let me sort of grok what's going on here. But like, I was really close to just like bouncing out of the game because I had no idea that there was a consequence. There was a branch that I was not, exploring. And that branch being like, you should die in this battle. Right.
Yeah.
So
I think that's like, to the commenter's question of like, what are the pros and cons of that? Like, I think that one of the big cons of it is you can bump up against players' expectations or the goals that they have in the game if you haven't done it correctly.
Right.
And in some cases, I think if you give the player like too much agency in those moments, it actually causes problems and confusion for them because of that. Right.
Yeah, totally. Sometimes it's better to just play it in
hold their hand. Yeah, just hold their hand through it. Like if you want to make a story moment, sometimes it's better just to take the reins away from them and make your player sit through that moment and hopefully enjoy it. Right.
Yeah. Or, because you have the full spectrum of like, you have full agency to like partial, like various partial agency situations, like funnels or like, like a choice funnel that actually pushes you into like making the final choice, or like I said, okay, they get to hear you play a cutscene because, and a lot of that though depends on, am I playing me or am I playing a character?
Right.
And a cutscene is more forgivable when I'm playing a character. Yes. And there's a more sort of structured narrative happening than an open-ended,
totally,
empty vessel game. And like, which actually brings me to like one of my problems with the final choice in Grand Theft Auto 4. Like there is a final choice there, 96 story missions in that I like, I was at 64 at 9 p.m. Like I was like, 64 missions. I got to be close to finished. Right. And I just was like, I'm finishing this game tonight. And then little did I know it was like another 30 missions. And like, I think around 4 a.m, I was like, I'm Nico Bellic. I'm doing my thing. Oh, here's the final choice. And the final choice is I've got a sniper rifle. And through a scope, I can see the crime boss and the DA are about to have a meeting in like, you know, a public area was supposed to be safe. And your choice is who do you shoot? Right. And like, oh, I think, by the way, this is, I think where like parts of my ideas for Ghost of Iwo came from now that I think about it. Okay. But basically the choice is who do you shoot? And I played both endings. Like I saved it intentionally at the point of no return. And I played both because I was like, it's 4 a.m. I'm here now. I might as well see both story outcomes. Right. And like, both endings for me personally were dissatisfying.
Why do you think that was the case?
So they were fine ends to the actual narrative story that was happening. And I was playing through the story mission. So I was very up to speed on everything that was going.
Right.
But the ludonarrative dissonance of like my activities in an open world versus the character I was supposed to be playing, I was basically having a conflict between who am I as Nico Bellic and who are they telling me Nico Bellic is? And we got to a place where I was like, that's not me, bro. Right.
Yep.
And so it wasn't bad. It was just, for me personally, it was dissatisfying.
I mean, that probably means, you know, they didn't give you enough levers to like, they gave you enough levers to impart like a version of yourself into that character, but not enough levers to kind of flesh it out. So like, if you compare that to something like Disco Elysium, where you have tons and tons and tons of ways to make your character, and you know what I mean?
Sure.
Like that is a game where they want you to flesh that out, and they've created the inroads. But like you talking about that ludonarrative dissonance makes sense because Grand Theft Auto is trying to tell like an explicit narrative story,
totally. Right?
You know?
Yeah. I mean, I think they've had the Heat mission in every Grand Theft Auto. Like, but like, yes, there is a larger cinematic story going on. Even the beginnings, you know, like Grand Theft 5 still has it, right? Even though like the longevity of that game is player to player in the online, that narrative piece is what gives it that cinematic feel, right? And so they can't skip that, right? They absolutely need it, but I think the more they serve the open world stuff, the easier it is to fall into like a ludonarrative like dissonance trap, right? By the way, actually, hold on. Ludonarrative dissonance. Can you define it in simple terms for those of us that are not game design types in this way?
I'll do my best to put it into a cohesive. So ludonarrative dissonance, right, is sort of almost like a meta term where there's a dissonance or a conflict between the broader goals that you have kind of for yourself versus the explicit goals that you have in the game, right? So I as a player, I want to grow in power, but there's a dissonance because the game won't let me do that, or it does it in a way that is at odds with that broader goal.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. Yes. And using me as the example, my persona in the open world was like the lowest of the low, like zero morality, like a total sociopath. Right.
So you wanted to shoot both of them.
I did want to shoot both of them because like, you know, burn the world down. But like in that choice moment, I think the ending that I chose that, you know, as the one that I thought would best serve was, I think, shooting the DA. Right. Okay. So like basically the anti-law choice.
Sure.
And what ended up happening was like, we're trying to make Nico into kind of a thief with a heart of gold. And I was like, no, I made the choice that says my heart is black. Right.
Yes.
That's the dissonance part. I was saying that in my experience, I've been playing this character as the darkest of the dark. You know, like it's like somewhere in the early episodes of like, you know, episode 3 or something, the Emperor comes out and gives all the fucking Padawans like lollipops. Right. You'd be like, what? Yep. Right? What is this? Right? Or like, you know, kill everybody, but not the kids. Like it would cause this like expectation of what you were going to get. And that's the dissonance. I thought we were going to go down this path, which is the darkest of the dark. And what I got was this sort of muddy, he's not all bad kind of an ending, right? And I was like, I'm sure they were trying to make the most appealing ending for the most people. And like, I was not that player at that time. I was like, I was like, this is, if we're going to match the fact that I just ran over 3 grandmothers at an ATM and then took all their money and then drove off in their car, I want the bad guy ending, right?
Right.
And so, you know, that's the actions of the world were not fitting the ending that I was fed. So anyway, so that's ludonarrative dissonance.
USAA knows dynamic duos can save the day, like superheroes and sidekicks, or auto and home insurance. With USAA, you can bundle your auto and home and save up to 10%. Visit USAA.com/bundle. Bundle savings are off total premium, not available in all states or in all situations. To qualify, auto policy must be active prior to property policy issue, subject to change. Restrictions apply. Membership eligibility and product restrictions apply and are subject to change. USAA means United Services Automobile Association and its affiliates, San Antonio, Texas.
With a major selection of the looks your kiddos love starting at just $4 in the Walmart app, a new school year means a stylish new them. Who knew? Find skater skirts and Crocs that say, I'm casual but cool. Sparkly sneakers that say, it's my classroom, you're just learning in it. And preppy polos that say, I'm the teacher's pet, even if they're mommy's menace at home. Find their favorite styles starting at just $4 in the app. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new.
Let's go back a little bit. I'm going to give you another example of an older game that did something really nice systemically, but it didn't have larger narrative problems, but it had an experiential systemic change. Okay. So Jagged Alliance 2.
I don't think I've ever played that one.
All right. So it's a squad tactics game. And inside the world of Jagged Alliance, you are playing the leader of a bunch of mercenaries, right? And in fact, you are physically in the world. And they present it to you diegetically. You log in, and it's you opening your laptop on your computer screen. And so there's like, you know, access to the web, well, their web, right? Like the mercenary marketplace. It's like, you know, you open the dark web, like they sell the fantasy to you. But the first thing that you do before you like character creation is actually taking a personality quiz, right?
Okay, fun.
And so you take, but there's two things built into this. So you take a personality quiz, and it's all stuff like an intruder jumps into your bedroom in the middle of the night. Multiple choice. A, grab the knife that's always on your bedstand and stab him. Like B, hide under the bed and escape out the window. Right? You know, it's like, and like that one is stealth. The other one is like you get +1 in knives. Like, you know, you would take this whole questionnaire, and it was really cool. The problem is I had a very set character I wanted to play, so I started going through and mapping what all the choices did to get the character to optimize for the character I wanted. Right? So the second piece of this, though, is they built personal associations between you and your mercenaries and the mercenaries to each other. So when you hired mercenaries, you would get a little thing there like rival or like friends with or something like that. And when you took 2 mercenaries on mission that were friends, they got a slight bonus, but they also had banter. Like, oh, it's been a long time since I've seen you, or like, how was that? Remember that mission we did in Paris? Like that type of stuff, which was super cool. But the other one is they also added their rivals. So if you had 2 characters in that were built to not like each other, they were always cutting at each other verbally. Like it was like, oh yeah, you think that was a great shot. That was terrible. Some of it sounded friendly, and some of it sounded like, oh my God, I'm going to have a situation here. Right. And so there was some really nice things that they built in, and it wasn't directly narrative, but it helped fill out the world in a way that was more systemic than like a direct choice. And so like who I built as their leader impacted that slightly. Right. Like who would be friendly with me, or who had an affinity, and it changed the whole flavor of the game. You could play the game multiple times and not have exactly the same mercenary experience. Right. So
that's really cool.
But there was a lot of room for that back then. We were very experimental in like the 90s and the early, we were finding our way and trying new stuff. Right. So.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the other part of this question was about sort of explicit choices that you make in something like a BioWare or Telltale game. What's interesting is, well, there's a couple of things to think about. I said, I think at the top of this, that I think one of the big things you have to pay attention to is what are sort of my expectations or goals as a player, right? And in a game like a BioWare game or a Telltale game where there are like morality systems, or there are choices that can affect characters and characters can die, basically what we found is that pretty much most players will try to play the optimal everybody be nice path. So, I mean, I'm talking like 70 to 80% of players like will pick the Paragon system over the Renegade system their first playthrough. and ditto for like a Telltale game, right? So it's really important that you as a designer are making it very understood what is going to happen if you pick that choice in what it's going to do to your relationship with that character. So an example where that went wrong is in the first episode of The Wolf Among Us. Bigby is on his first is on his first kind of part of this case that he's working, and you go and you have a drink with the woodsman, who canonically in the world of fables is like your rival, right? Because Bigby is the big bad wolf, and the woodsman kills the big bad wolf in the story, right? So you're sitting there, and the woodsman is really drunk, and you're kind of talking it up, and you get the option to basically, the option comes up and it says glass him. So a lot of players thought that what was going to happen is you're going to buy him a drink, right? This is an olive branch to, set this adversarial path to something that's more redemptive. Well, in reality, what that option did was it shortcut the conversation, and Bigby would pick a glass and basically smash it in his face and start the bar fight. Right. So we got lots and lots of comments from players who were so frustrated and baffled because they were confused by what they were going to get. And that's a great example where the wording created an unintentional consequence that ruined their goal, which was to have an optimal play experience where nobody dies, you're best friends with everybody by the end of the experience, right? To use another example, the same thing is in Mass Effect, right? So in Mass Effect 2 has this massive mission at the end where all your companions that you've collected throughout the game like take part in it if they're part of your crew, right? And in order for all of those to survive, you have to like
nurture,
you have to complete their their character quest line to finish it, and then you have to put them in the right spot in this like final mission and all this kind of stuff. Right. So I don't have stats on Mass Effect, but I am fairly confident that it would have been a similar thing where if you had a character die on that mission, you were super upset, because you've invested all this time and effort into experiencing their story, and for you, a perfect ending is everybody lives, and we're all buddies.
This is what I'm trying to do in my version of this game.
Yes. So that is a thing you have to be really careful with when you do games like that have those kind of systems, is you have to be thinking about what your audience is going to be trying, like what are they motivated by in those types of experiences, right?
So this is interesting though, because I think it brings up a structural thing that I think you and I first talked about at GenVid, right? So GenVid is aggregate input. Everybody's voting on what the branch is going to be. I think it's the first time you and I had like a more narrative-based debate, which is like, we need to define who is the player role-playing. Are they playing themselves when they make this vote, or are they role-playing, like, what is the outcome that we think that they're looking for so that we know how to sell it to them? Right? Because like, if we just go by it's them, then guess what? Almost everybody's going to pick the positive option every time. Right? And then the flip side of that is like, if we can get them to role play a character, we might be able to get them to split it off. I don't remember how we ended it, but we basically were like, everybody's in the individual fantasy, right? Like we couldn't get the group dynamics to like really affect people's choices as much. There was debate, but not like actual choice changing.
I think the idea was, we know that the majority of the audience is going to try to pick the good path, right? And so what are the systems that we could put in place that help counteract that in fair and interesting ways, right? So that's like where like the rally system came from, right? So, there was a system that said you could basically start a rally and pour points into an option, and you could basically swing it the other way. I think we called it it's like the horse race, right? So that was kind of an interesting thing that we were trying to kind of push back on what we suspected was going to be true of our audience, which was true, is that people were gonna try and pick the good option, and that turned out to be the case. But I mean, it was cool. There were moments where a small group of people who wanted to watch the world burn got together
and influenced
flipped it.
That's true.
They flipped it.
And it was great because it caused a lot of audience drama, right? So
it did.
Which was really fun to watch, right? It was a lot of like that was a fun week. It was basically watching everybody's interactions with each other get really salty.
Oh man, they got so salty.
What's really great though is that was enabled by the writing being very clear, right? Because people were able to predict this is the good choice, this is the bad choice, and so they had agency over what their individual choice was, and then what they were going to band together on to try to influence the overarching story, right?
Yes, I think you have to be really careful if you're going to hide in a like interactive narrative experience. If you're going to hide the consequence of something, you need to have a really good reason why you're doing it, because more often than not, you're just going to upset a player. Right?
Yeah, like I said, you're an informed shopper. Like if like it's one thing if I get a gotcha box and I open it up and I get a surprise, like that's what I signed up for.
Right.
But how upset are you when you buy a box of Frosted Flakes and there's no frosting?
Yeah.
Like that's essentially what we're talking about is like small print on the back of the box, like special Frosted Flakes, no frosting. Like these are the healthy ones, right? Like extra like whey protein or something. Like that's not informing people of what they're getting, right? It wasn't just a mistake in this like absurd example that I just came up with. But like that's the kind of upset that people will have when they feel like they've been duped, right? Because it feels like a personal betrayal.
Right. And I think that's why a lot of games want to do, we call expose the rails, meaning they take all of the different sort of narrative systems in place and they put it in some bit of UI so that audiences can always see where they sit on this thing. And the advantage of that is it helps with clarity, right? Mm-hmm. So as a player, you're a more informed shopper. The downside of it is it can feel a little cold in the middle of like a dramatic scene because you're not thinking and experiencing the drama. You're now thinking about what's happening to the UI. My hearts went up or my hearts went down, right?
And that's tough. And like, I actually tend to prefer things that you see more in MMOs, which is like faction systems where like I'm friends with the assassins, but not friends with thieves. And like, like basically like set up more than a binary. Mm-hmm. Although most of those systems end up being like, do they like you or not? So it ends up being binary across, but it's just split up across in different factions so that you have these more nuanced like exchanges between the two. Oh, so speaking of which, a hidden branch that I didn't get to. So like Skyrim has an example of this, of like, there was a consequence for a choice. Mm-hmm. Like you take a mission, it's kill the teacher, right? Because she's terrorizing all these students, right? Mm-hmm. You get there and it turns out to be kind of a gray situation. You're like, seems like regular old kindergarten discipline. Like, what am I going to do? Mm-hmm. And your choice there actually determines whether or not you open up access to the Assassin's Guild. Right. And so like I think they hint at it, but Skyrim is so full of detail and nuance and stuff. I can't tell you that I ever saw that I was coming up to an actual choice. Like I said, I think they just don't beat you over the head with it. But I was like, you know what? I actually think I accidentally killed her. Like I was just kind of playing around. And then for probably several real-time weeks, I didn't open up the Assassin's branch because systemically I wasn't sleeping. Mm-hmm. So the game basically was waiting for me to fall asleep so that it could wake me up with an assassin on my chest. But I was so overpowered by that point, you had
no need to.
Yeah, I was like literally like, I am a god. I do not need sleep. And I would just cruise the world, you know, like never resting, never really eating, like this weird sort of like being from the beyond that was just terrorizing, the whole world. Actually, side story. Did you see that video where somebody in Skyrim used the slow time? Like they ran out of arrows and they used slow time to grab one out of the air and then shoot the guy who shot the arrow.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I was like, why didn't I think of that? That's so amazing. So I need to go back and play some Skyrim again. That besides the fact that I love shouting people off of mountaintops, Like there's lots of emergent stuff in that game. But yeah, the Assassin's whole storyline, I would have missed that whole thing except by accident. And it actually has a really, did you play that storyline?
Yes.
It has a really relevant ending to that whole storyline that affects the whole world. And you wouldn't get that if you, skipped it, or which is fine, but
I think that's why I'm trying to think of games that do this, but I think I like games that don't lock you out of that content. Like you have an option to, if you want to go and continue that line. And I don't necessarily mean like a UI, like a Prince of Persia, like, oh, that's not how it went. Like instead, I mean like there's like a soft fail involved in it, right? Where like, okay, I have to go and do this other thing, but I can now get back on track if I want to go over there. Like I know, was it Fallout 3, like the Nuketown choice? What's the name of that town? Basically, there's going to be an option where you drop a nuclear bomb on one of the towns. Yeah. And it's just gone from the game. And like from a stakes standpoint in the narrative, that's pretty strong stakes, right? But from a gameplay standpoint, now I'm locked out of all of the quest content that I might have been interested in. Totally. Right?
And any of the shops or any of the special items, like all that stuff is
exactly.
Gone.
So I, what I find happening is, I don't have as much time to play games these days. So I'll open up a guide, which I don't want to do because I want to understand what the consequence is. Right. And so this is where I feel like we're tension, right?
Or you feel it and you're like, oh, save. And then you're like,
or you save scum, right?
You save scum, yeah, totally. And you end up with like, oh, I'm gonna have to play like the 3 branches or whatever because I want to see it.
I think I like when I feel like there's some grace in what's happening. Like, sure, let me have the like cool story moment that you dreamed up, but like, is there a way for me? Like, do some of those NPCs move? Did they get out of the town beforehand, and now they've set up shop at like a. Yeah, I mean, and the tough thing, obviously, game dev is expensive. You don't have time for that, right? Like, so
there has to be finite branching. Which
is another good one to talk about, which is Telltale would sometimes put up that UI, and it was a bit of smoke and mirrors. So that's an interesting thing to talk about. Is when are you using these to sort of set up expectations and build in players? Right. How can you get away with it? What's a good thing and what's not a good thing?
Really, there's actually no meaningful choice here. So I'm sorry. Let me recap that in a way that everybody can understand. What Martin is saying is that sometimes the text that tells you this is a meaningful choice, somebody will remember what you're saying, would come up, and actually it didn't on the system side mean anything. It was literally just there as a communication tool for the player to actually co-opt them into the magic trip. Right. It was the equivalent of like pick a card. Right. Like you are now part of the system. We want you to feel like you have agency, but you actually don't have any agency here.
To give like a story example, it would be, this didn't exist in Walking Dead, but let's say that Lee is sitting Clementine down and he's going to tell her a hard truth. Right. Like you're not as strong as you think you are, or something like that. Sure. Right. And there's no story consequence in this, meaning it doesn't mean she's not going to go on the mission with you or anything like that. It's just a way to build out and flesh out their relationship. And so a designer might have suggested in that moment, hey, what if we put that, like Clementine will remember that in that moment because it feels somewhat appropriate, right?
Right.
In that moment, because it's a strong character beat between the two of them.
It helps sell the moment. Yeah.
It does. But mechanically, there's not going to be any kind of callback to that necessarily. Right.
Well, what's interesting, think about it this way. If there is a sequel, you could potentially actually save that choice for like the next game or the next episode or the next whatever. So I love these types of systems in general, and they sort of like get back to like addressing the question. I mean, the actual pros and cons of these systems. Let's see if you and I can try and do a quick summation, right? Like,
sure.
Like I like having as much agency as possible, but that's me as a player. So the pros of like, a more advertised system, right? With notifications and story branching and stuff is, I feel like an informed shopper. I have agency. I am getting to make the choices that I want to make, regardless if it's me or the character. However, I do really enjoy the subtle systems too, but those to me are better applied to changing the world experience, right? And even if it's nuking a town, like that one, I don't know that I 100% agree with, but it was very dramatic.
Yes.
You know, like I like when those things are much more about systemic changes, you know, like some of the ones I was talking about with like, you know, Jagged Alliance 2 or something like that. Like some of your choices in that game also, literal dialogue options were also changing the way your mercenaries felt about you, right? So
yeah,
I enjoy that stuff, but I think they just have different uses.
I think I would say a yes to all of that. I think I would say hidden consequences can be really powerful because they're surprising to the player. The problem is when those butt up against what I am trying to accomplish or what I care about in the game, right? And so if you're gonna pick something that is an unintended or hidden consequence, you have to be very careful that you understand where your players are going to be when they experience this and that it's not going to upset them, right? Chrono Trigger works because the story keeps going regardless of what option you get. You're not locked out of any story content. You're not given any exclusive items one way or the other. The story just keeps going, right? And so it was an exciting way to subvert the expectations of things that you did in the first hour without breaking what I cared about in terms of the narrative, right? And so you have to, I think you have to be real careful if you're going to use, you know, those hidden consequences in that way.
Yep, agree, 100%. Okay, I actually think we could keep digging into this, but we're kind of at time.
Yeah.
I think next time you come back, maybe we actually workshop an example. Like, let's design something that, you know, ahead of time, and we'll bring it in and present it to the audience or something like that, where we remember, we're audio only, so we'll have to present it as a very fun radio play or something. But like,
sounds good.
You know, I've done more challenging things. I think it could be really fun.
Yeah, I think that would be really fun.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Martin. Thanks for taking the time again. Good luck with all of your endeavors. Let me know if I can help with any of that stuff.
Sounds good.
Yeah, well, definitely come back again.
Yeah, sounds good. I had a great time.
Brain Arcade is a Princess Hermit production, produced by Kyrene Kim, music and mixing by Jonathan Ontiveros. The podcast is hosted by me, Chris Cross. You can find me and my other endeavors at coffeewithcross.com.
You deserve better healthcare, and so do we all. Medicine in America is a podcast that shares real stories of patients and doctors reshaping the future, because the revolution in care isn't coming, it's already here. Real stories, real change, a better future for healthcare.
Electricast.
Hey guys, it's your girl Yasia. I want to share some really exciting news with you. I just dropped my first ever single, Spell on You, off my upcoming debut EP, Devil's Room, on RM Records. It's simply devilicious. Check out Spell on You wherever you listen to music. Bye for now.
I never thought I'd fall in love like this. It's time to close the chapter, but I think I needed this.
Electricast.